Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Three heads, Old Yang. Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Two tails, one head, Yang Yang. Two tails, one head, Yang Yang. 2 heads, 1 tail, Young Yin. So our bottom trigram, we got broken, solid, broken for our primary hexagram, and then solid, solid, broken. This is Con water beneath. Xun Winderwood. Nope, sorry. Dewy Lake or Marsh. Con water. Con is deep water, flowing and formless. He is the complement of Li, dark where Li is bright, unconscious to her sharp lucidity, and represents a more fluid, intuitive, I've got a cold, so this is going to be wheezy, an emotional way of perceiving. This is danger, exposure, and solitude, and the need to respond with courageous self-reliance when confronted by the haunting unknown. Water is the middle sun, situated in the north, associated with midwinter and midnight. And dewy lake or marsh. Dewy is lake and marsh, abundant energy that teems with life. She is the impulse to communicate, share, and exchange, and delights in both inner and outer conversation. She brings things into circulation and gives them voice. This is the sheer enjoyment of participating in life to the full, expressing ourselves and hearing others and satisfying our desires. Lake is the youngest daughter, spirit of the fertile west and of autumn. Dewy lake or marsh above Con water. Give us the hexagram 47. Our changing line means that it will transform from an old yang to a young yin. So that will give us Kun earth with broken, broken, broken. And will give us a supporting hexagram. Kun is earth, open to receive and support what comes to her, providing for its full development. She makes inspiration manifest, gives it form, and sustains its growth. Earth is available to be used, ready to lend her strength to the work without limit. She protects and accepts all things in their totality, present and potential, in an unconditional embrace. Earth is mother, found in the southwest and the harvest time of late summer and early autumn. Dewy lake or marsh above Kun earth. Give us hexagram 45. And we will look at the titles to our hexagrams from James de Corn's Gnostic Book of Changes. Nope, sorry. Louis Ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. Hexagram 47 is exhaustion, refining body and mind. Sounds about right. I think I said that last time I got exhaustion. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 45, gathering, unifying vitality, energy, and spirit. And then we will look at the secret hexagram towards the end. So, first thing we will look into is Kiwi's I Ching Tarot. Hexagram 47, Kiwi calls oppression. Oppression, slow progress, going through trials, accepting difficulties. Be hindered and encounter difficulties. Even though you know it is a difficult situation, you accept it and stick to your original intention. When it's hard to be trusted with words. And 45. She calls gathering together, neither of which I've gotten since I got these cards. I don't think. 45. Gathering together. Gathering, blessings of ancestors, transference, worship. Maintain good faith and prepare for chaos in public gatherings. When people and things come together, unexpected things can happen. Like a bunch of people grabbing this person's arms while they're throwing or gathering rocks. I don't know. From the beach? I don't know about it. We may or may not find out. Next, we will look at Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future. When we approach the Oracle, when we approach the I Ching to consult the Oracle, the question we bring to it will always have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. Hexagram 47, Hilary Barrett calls confined. Key questions. What if you could only rely on yourself? Who are you when you are alone? Oracle, confined, creating success, constancy of a great person, good fortune. Not a mistake, there are words not trusted. The Chinese character for confined or oppressed shows a tree completely encircled by walls, an image of entrapment and isolation. You are cut off and cannot reach out to others. The great person finds good fortune in constancy to an inner ideal. This is the supreme test of character, whether you can hold to your purpose when there is no encouragement, no confirmation from outside, but only your own inner resources. The lack of outward signs of progress does not mean that you are wrong or that the world is wrong. Rather than resenting the walls, concentrate on the life and growth within them. Do not place too much value on words. They will not provide you with a way out. Neither conversation nor argument, nor your own reasoning and theorizing. Words alone are only circulating ideas. They lack the real, personal connection that would make them trustworthy. Image. Lake without water, confined. A noble one carries out the mandate, fulfills her aspiration. The lake water has all drained away into the stream below. Where there might have been a sparkling center of vitality, communication and exchange, there is no water left, no energy for communication. Even in such straits, a noble one is still active. The lake water drained downward and inward, merging with the stream in a single strong current. In the same way, a noble one lets her mandate, what she is called on to do, flow together with the aspiration of her own heart. The two strengthen one another and create an inner momentum that follows through to fulfillment. Sequence. Being confined follows from hexagram 46, pushing upward. Pushing upward and not reaching an end is naturally confining. You drive yourself upward, full of optimism, confidently expecting to reach your goal, and then you don't. And so you find yourself feeling trapped, exhausted by the climb, and also profoundly shaken and betrayed by the way things have failed to work out as they should. Pair. Confined forms a pair with hexagram 48, the well. The well is wholly connected. Confined means meeting together. By its nature, the well is already limitlessly connected, while the confined tree must reach down towards the water table. Reaching inward, you find help. Outwardly, the oppressive walls are unbroken, but what might the inner space open onto? And then you have this picture of this bird trapped. Next, we'll look at our supporting hexagram 45, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 45, gathering. Key questions. What is asked of you? What are you investing in? Oracle. Gathering, creating success. The king enters his temple. Fruitful to see great people, creating success. Constancy bears fruit. Using great sacrificial animals, good fortune. Fruitful to have a direction to go. The old character for gathering shows people gathered like grass, or perhaps gathered to bring in the harvest. They have a shared identity and invest together for a purpose, looking for what will bear fruit. Sometimes this is an external gathering, sometimes an internal one, collecting yourself and integrating your many roles and strengths, getting yourself together. Many people, roles, energies, and issues are concentrated in this single focal point. The king enters his temple to connect his people with the ancestral spirits. This is a time to strengthen shared roots and understand mundane daily activities as part of a larger story and identity that gives them meaning. With this connection made, it is time to see great people. Originally, this might have meant consulting with diviners to ensure your offerings were made in harmony with the time and the spirits. Seeing great people, whether in the flesh or with your inner vision, gives you longer-term guidance to align your efforts with your purpose. Then a steady persistence will bear fruit, and you are making great efforts and an act of faith, investing the best you have in this gathering. You need those good, deep roots and clear-sighted guidance, and you need to know where you are going with it all. Image. Lake higher than the earth, gathering. A noble one sets aside weapons and tools and warns against the unexpected. The reservoir has high earth banks, its water level higher than your home. You can grow more crops, but if it flooded, you would lose everything. Poised between intensity and overload, with so much invested in one place, the noble one takes special care. Inwardly, she is quietly resourceful and prepared for trouble. Outwardly, she communicates the need to stay watchful. Sequence. Gathering follows from hexagram 44, coupling. They meet one another, then they assemble, and so gathering follows. Gathering means assembling. The gathering expands to encompass everything that meets together, even the unteamable, unpredictable forces of change that arrived in hexagram 44 are integrated here. Untamable. think I said unteamable. Pair. Gathering forms a pair with hexagram 46 pushing upward. Gathering means assembling. Pushing upward means not coming back. Before you can set out single-mindedly towards a chosen goal, you must gather your people and resources. The stronger your purpose, the more you will be willing to invest, and the more you invest, the less likely you are to turn back. Investment and aspiration are two sides of the single coin. A single coin. And here's the picture. Next, we will read our changing line 2, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. It takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 as the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. Hexagram 47. Changing line 2. Confined while drinking and feasting, scarlet sashes come from all directions. Fruitful to use thank offerings and oblations, setting out to bring order, pitfall, no mistake. You are confined in your ability to share in the give and take of relationship, so that even surrounded by people, you are still isolated. Messengers and scarlet sashes offer you a meaningful way to participate and ask for your response. They represent something important to you, which can complicate the relationship immensely. It's best to respond modestly, with small offerings that gently open the channels of communication. By making gifts only for the sake of giving, you can care for the new connection. Be cautious about seeking more than this, more responsibility, or more direct control, or more change all at once. If it seems that you are being offered the chance to set your world at rights, however much it may need setting to rights, do not take it. Like, do not take on too much at this time. All right. Next, we will dive into Annabelle Wen's I Ching The Oracle, an updated translation annotated with cultural and historical references, restoring the I Ching to its shamanic origins. Whew. Don't get sick. But if you do, don't do an I Ching reading. All right, just so you know. Hexagram 47, Annabelle Wen calls blockade. The Oracle. Ambitions hit a wall. Feeling exhausted and worn down, you are overwhelmed, unable to cope with your feelings of entanglement. Barriers of entry to the next level of advancement. Forces cause you to become isolated, closed off, and surrounded. Obstruction of passage and progress. A state of inner oppression. In the darkness, you do not yet see how the restraining bonds can be broken. First, do not let external forces restrain you. Restrain yourself. Control what you can control. Cultivate an inner strength that becomes an outer strength, and you can shatter the iron hand that is otherwise holding you back. Exhausted and entangled, feelings of hardship bring on a depression. The sage subscribes to the conviction that destiny is leavened by free will and determination. Yet the sage also knows that destiny is written into the annals, and to know destiny so that one might navigate it is to consult the annals. Forecast of triumph over the hardships, auspicious for the eminent one. Truth presents itself, but there is no truth. Trust presents itself, but there is no trust. There is a message, but it is not a message. Words spoken, but there is no meaning. Sign of the sacrifice. Losses sustained for a greater good or greater subsequent success. Hexagram 47 describes one with great ambitions, but with that comes great demands. Pursuit of big rewards comes with big risks. At this particular point in time, challenges and barriers hold you back from movement forward. Perseverance will bring you good fortune. The etymology of the ideogram for Kun, hexagram 47, is wood, symbolic of growth and prosperity, boxed in and surrounded. This is the chi force that besieges with difficulties. When hexagram 47 comes up, increase wood chi in your surroundings. The trigram thunder is also utilized in metaphysical measures to counteract the blockade. When the fifth line of hexagram 47 is changed from yang to yin, the hexagram becomes 40, G, meaning to release the tension and untie the knots. That upper trigram transformation is from lake to thunder. Likewise, hexagram 47 was traditionally used in baneful magic to blockade someone and prevent that person from achieving prosperity or advancement. That's not very nice. Next, we'll look at hexagram 45, our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence the direction of travel and underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Benabel Wynn calls it assembly. The oracle, a leader rises among them. You are destined to gather the people in congregation and unite them under your purpose. But take care that when you do, you are also prepared to handle the strife that is bound to arise when people congregate. This is your forewarning. Have a contingency plan in place. It's not about personal sacrifice, it's about aligning personal will with heaven's will. Choose progress. Start now. The lake collects water, which seeps into the earth and enriches it. A fish and a dragon gather in assembly. The sage is called to refine another, a warrior of great talent and ability. Stop not the Zhaoyu. And it's a mythical creature we'll learn about after this. The king enters the ancestral temple, favorable to go meet the eminent one, an auspicious omen. An honorable leader or messiah arrives. The sage must sharpen the weapons. The weapons will be needed to battle dangers ahead. Regarding the warrior, this ideogram could also be a reference to the Quanrong, an ethnic group that often invaded the Zhao. The Quanrong claimed ancestry from two sacred white dogs and venerated the white dog spirits as the emblem of their clan. The king entering the ancestral temple is a reminder to be humble and honor your roots. Great fortunes to come from proceeding. The Zhaoyu was a mythical creature of Chinese lore that symbolized benevolence, virtue, loyalty, and righteousness. Like the Quilin, the Zhaoyu appears as an omen of a coming great leader. The Zhaoyu appears to forecast the rise of a spiritual leader or a kind-hearted sovereign, one who is a paragon of goodness and who is religiously devout. The Zhaoyu was said to be a creature that resembles a white tiger with black spots. According to the Book of Mountain and Seas, Shanhai Jing, a pre-Qin dynasty text, 221 BC, the Zhaoyu is a sacred animal resembling a white tiger with black markings. There are also 5 magical attendant grasshoppers or scorpions in service of the Zhaoyu. There's a painting of a Zhaoyu in figure 1.2 at the end of chapter 1. Let's see it. Let's get a glimpse of this warlock. Chapter 1, huh? All right, give me a second. The end of chapter 1. Here we go. That's chapter 1. Here's the Zhaoyu. Wow, that was pretty awesome. Bam. says, illustration of a Zhaoyu mythic beast referenced in Hexagram 3, 45, and 61 from the Book of Mountain and Seas. Yeah, all right. Next, we'll look at our supporting hexagram, or did we do that? Get your head in the game. 45. Yeah, we did. All right, so we will now look at our changing line 2, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. It takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. (47) Changing line 2. Satiated by food and wine excess, a vermilion sash wearer arrives. A sacrificial offering brings good fortune. Advancing brings adversity. A state of inner strife and self-imposed oppression, satiating excessively through food and wine, or immediate gratification to numb the pain and dull the senses. You try to give the superficial impression that all is well with you, but there is oppression within. You have imprisoned a part of yourself inside of yourself. A vermilion sash wearer is a harbinger of change. You are tempted to make rash, hasty, dramatic changes to your life, changing just for the sake of changing. Doing so would be ill-advised. Thus, advancing brings adversity. Official seals worn by ministers were often hung from a vermilion sash. Thus, an alternate interpretation of the vermilion sash would be as government action, law, and policy, systemic or institutional influences on the situation at hand. This can be a foreshadowing that some form of punishment is imminent. A sacrificial offering can mean self-reflection and deeper contemplation of the matter at hand before taking any action, or it can mean consulting your ancestors for counsel. Next, we will look at I-ming's Taoist teaching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. Our primary hexagram, 47. Exhaustion. Exhaustion develops the righteous. Great people are fortunate and blameless. If one complains, one will not be trusted. Explanation. Exhaustion means reaching an impasse. In the body of the hexagram, below is water, in which one yang is fallen in between two yins. Above is lake, in which one yin is on top of two yangs. Both picture mundanity making inroads on the celestial, so that celestial energy does not come through. Therefore, it is called exhaustion. As for the qualities of the hexagram, from the midst of danger, water, it produces joy, lake. Joy comes out of danger. So it also has the sense of resolving exhaustion, resolving an impasse. This hexagram represents polishing and refining body and mind. It follows on the previous hexagram, gathering. Gathering involves attaining joy by accord, whereby one gathers together the medicines, goes back to the fundamental, and returns to the original. But if one can only gather in ease and cannot gather in difficulty, this is still inability to accord, inability to rejoice. People who try to practice the Tao can all keep steadfast when they are in easy circumstances, but many of them waver in determination when they are in difficult or perilous situations. They may change their minds because of the pressures of making a living, or they may slack in determination due to illness. Their spirits may flag because of old age, or they may stop work because of obstruction by some obsession. All these are cases in which people do not exert the mind of Tao and are hindered by exhaustion, so they ultimately do not attain the Tao. If the mind is not exhausted, even though the body be exhausted, the path is not at an impasse, even though the situation presents an impasse, and one can be joyful even when in difficulty. Then there is a developmental aspect within exhaustion. But even though being able to rejoice even in difficulty is something people cannot fully attain, and there will inevitably be a point of exhaustion, nevertheless, if they become exhausted where they should not, they will not attain development. This is because the developmental aspect of exhaustion lies in being correct. Dealing with exhaustion correctly, growing correctly, while exhausted, one goes along in harmony with the time. Going along in harmony with the time is possible only for great people imbued with the quality of correct balance. Great people, while being very wise, appear to be ignorant. While being very skillful, they appear inept. Random thoughts do not occur to them, and they cannot be influenced by circumstances. Their conduct is unaffected, and they are not concerned with externals. Not only do they find good fortune wherever they are, they also accord with the order of life and are blameless. As for those whose main concern is food and clothing, they are untrustworthy in an impasse. They will take trouble in hopes of fortune, but as soon as things don't go their way, they show it in their words and expressions, complaining against heaven and blaming people. So blame goes along with them. How can this bring about good fortune? Those who deal with exhaustion and impasse rightly, who are able to be joyful even in difficulty, are great people. Those who are untrustworthy in an impasse, who take trouble only to please themselves, are petty people. It may be the same trouble and the same joy, but the distinction lies in how great people and petty people relate to the trouble and the joy. So those who practice the Tao should by all means maintain rectitude when exhausted and at an impasse. We're also going to read the commentary section at the back before we move on to the next hexagram. Exhaustion, lake above, water below. A lake with no water is exhausted. Therefore, superior people use life to the full and achieve their aim. Exhaustion means coming to an end. Above is lake, below is water. This is the lake leaking, the water flowing away so that there is no water in the lake. This is the image of exhaustion. What superior people see in this is that just as a lake without water is empty, when people lack purpose, their path is at an end. Therefore, they use life to the full to achieve their aim. There is a life that consists of a quantity of energy, and there is a life that consists of meaning of the Tao. The life that is a quantity of energy is created by the universe and is conditioned. The life of meaning of the Tao creates the universe and is primordial. The primordial life is fundamentally something celestial, associated with heaven. Because of mixture with acquired conditioning, it enters the realm of earth and changes into water. This is the one yang in the center of water. Once this celestial yang falls, the jewel of life is hidden and the whole body is completely mundane. There is no exhaustion more exhausting than this. Using life to the full means to get to the end of conditioned life. Achieving one's aim means to achieve the primordial life. Establishing this aim to use life to the full, using life to the full to achieve this aim, while the amount of energy depends on something else, creating life depends on one's self. Using the temporal to restore the primordial, ending false life and establishing real life, producing being in the midst of nothingness, seeking life within death. Getting through an exhausting impasse is like a lake without water, again being filled with water. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 45, gathering. Gathering is developmental. The king comes to have a shrine. It is beneficial to see a great person. This is developmental. It is beneficial to be correct. It is good to make a great sacrifice. It is beneficial to go somewhere. Gathering means assembly. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is lake, joyful, and below is earth, amenable. When one accords with others, they are joyful, so it is called gathering. This hexagram represents gathering the medicines together. It follows on the previous hexagram, parting. In parting, one parts from mundanity by celestial energy. The path of parting from mundanity is a task to be done after obtaining the elixir. Before the elixir is obtained, if not for the work of gathering together the medicines, the elixir will not form. After people are born, habit estranges them from what is essentially near. They forget the original reality and pursue external artificiality. So their mind and spirit are unstable, their vitality and energy are dissipated. It is not possible to immediately recover and concentrate the dissipated vitality and energy. It is important to be obedient and act harmoniously, progressing gradually in an orderly manner, not deviating from the process, applying the will single-mindedly, the longer the stronger, so that what was lost may be naturally recovered, what is gone may be restored. This is like a king coming to have a shrine for spirits. Ancestors are people's roots. If they forget their roots, people are disrespectful and inhuman. When the king comes to have a shrine for spirits, this is how to let people know there is a basis to be grateful for. People's original natural reality is like their ancestral roots. When people abandon reality and accept falsehood, that is like forgetting ancestral roots. If people can gather in their spirit and energy, cultivate essence and life, and restore the original natural reality, that is like not forgetting ancestral roots. When the king does not forget ancestral roots, he can unite the hearts of the people in the land. When practitioners of the Tao do not forget the fundamental, they can gather the great medicines of essence and life. But this matter of not forgetting the fundamental requires a great person to carry it out. It cannot be done by lesser people who do not know essence and life. Therefore, it is beneficial to see a great person. This is developmental. A great person is one who corrects self and corrects others. Correcting oneself, there is no ego. Spirit and energy do not dissipate, and rectitude becomes the self. Correcting others, there are no personalities. Character and constitution are sublimated, and rectitude becomes people. Correcting self and correcting others, inwardly thoughts do not arise, and externals do not enter. Inside and out are one single rectitude. Benevolence, justice, courtesy, and knowledge are all based on truthfulness. When the primordial is gathered together, essence is stabilized and life is solidified. Indeed, the benefit of development by gathering what is right is no small matter. What heaven enjoins on humanity is rectitude alone, and it is only by rectitude that humanity can answer heaven. Responding to heaven with rectitude, not forgetting the fundamental, is like making a great sacrifice to offer to heaven. It will not fail to bring about good fortune. But the way to make a great sacrifice and bring about good fortune cannot be accomplished simply by a moment of emptiness. It is necessary to tread the ground of reality step after step before one can achieve it. If you know but do not act on it, it is the same as not knowing. How can you then attain good fortune? So it is beneficial to go somewhere. The value of knowledge is only in its application. And the commentary section of 45. Gathering, lake above, earth below. Moisture rises onto the earth, gathering. Thus do superior people prepare weapons to guard against the unexpected. Gathering is assembling, above is lake, below is earth. Moisture rises onto the earth. When moisture is in the earth and rises onto the earth, everything on the earth is nurtured by it and flourishes. But there is a limit to water. It cannot always provide moisture for things. Sometimes things flourish and sometimes they don't. This is the image of gathering. What superior people see in this is that when practitioners of the Tao get to where the 5 elements are assembled and have been returned to the source, when everything acquired is obedient to their will, if they do not know how to prevent danger and take perils into consideration, eventually what has been gathered will again disperse, and they will not be able to avoid the trouble of losing what has been gained. Therefore, superior people prepare weapons to guard against the unexpected. Weapons means the tools of wisdom, the work of silent operation of spiritual awareness. When the primordial has been congealed, it is not subject to injury by acquired conditioning, but it is still necessary to dissolve the influences of personal history before nature and life can be stabilized. If there is any remaining contamination, eventually conditioning will reassert itself and the primordial will again become fragmented. Therefore, this work of guarding is indispensable. If one can prepare the weapons of wisdom to avoid being caught unawares, one will always have autonomous presence of mind, and the jewel of life will not be damaged. After a long time, the 5 elements will merge and sublimate. Body and mind will both be refined, merging with the Tao in reality, becoming eternally incorruptible. So the process of preserving integration is important. Next, we will look at our changing line 2, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. It takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. Hexagram 47, Exhaustion, changing line 2. Hard up for wine and food, then comes the regal robe. It is beneficial to make ceremonial offerings. To go on an expedition brings misfortune. No blame. Explanation. With Yang fallen in the midst of Yin, this is when sustenance is insufficient, like being hard up for wine and food. Luckily, firmness here is balanced, forgetting oneself for the Tao. Though the body be exhausted, the mind is not exhausted. One day bitterness will end and sweetness will arise. The great Tao completed, one then wears celestial clothing and eats celestial food. Cultivating celestial nobility, human nobility will follow. First, there are hard times, then there is success. We can be sure of this principle. The image of success after hardship likens the benefit to making ceremonial offerings to reach heaven with sincerity, seeing the effect after a long time. If, when one is in hard times, one wants to get out of hardship right away, that will instead bring on misfortune, and one cannot blame anyone if one comes to an impasse and doesn't get through. This line refers to success after hardship, growth after exhaustion. Next, we will look at James de Corn's Gnostic Book of Changes, which is a synthesis of several I Ching commentaries, all in one helpful place that I've left a link to in the description box below. You can go read all of this online. He's created it into a PDF as well in case you wanted to download it or print it off. He just didn't get it published. Hexagram 47, he calls oppression. He also puts in quotes from things like the Kabbalah or people like Carl Jung, and he does a summation at the end. Oppression. Other titles might be exhaustion, the symbol of repression and confinement, adversity, weariness, confining, entangled, hardship, depression, tiresome restriction, dried up. A quote from D.F. Hook. Actions speak louder than words. Judgment. Leg. Oppression means that successful progress is still possible. The perseverance of the truly great man brings good fortune without error, but if he relies on words, no one will believe them. Blowfold. Adversity leading to success thanks to persistence in a righteous course. Good fortune for the truly great and freedom from error. Though words be spoken, they will not inspire confidence. Great refers to high moral qualities. This hexagram is of evil omen for most people, but success can be won through tremendous persistence in doing what is right. Ritsuma/Karcher, confining. Growing trial, great people significant, without fault, possessing words not trustworthy. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of restriction and distress. It emphasizes that turning inward through accepting enclosure is the adequate way to handle it. Wu, hardship indicates pervasion and perseverance. There will be good fortune for the great man, no error, but their words do not make impressions on people. The image. Leg, an abyss beneath the marsh that drains its water, the image of oppression. Thus the superior man will sacrifice his life to attain his purpose. Ritsuma/Karcher, marsh without stream, confining. A chansu or chief son or superior person uses involving fate to release purpose. Cleary 2, developed people accomplish their will by living out their destiny. Developed people only live out their destiny. They do not willingly try to avoid following and accepting it. Being strong and balanced, they are able to be joyful even in danger. This is the will that is up to oneself. Developed people intend to accomplish their will and do not vacillate just because they run into problems. Wu, the marsh has no water. This is hardship. Thus the chansi, or chief son or superior person, is prepared to dedicate his life to fulfill his commitments. A marsh devoid of water is like a man deprived of his intellectual pursuits. This is unacceptable to a chansi. He would rather fight to the end than surrender to idiocy. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. In oppression, we see the dynamic lines covered and obscured by the magnetic. We see the attribute of perilousness in the lower trigram going on to cheerfulness in the upper. Who but the superior man is still able to advance, although straitened by circumstances? The central position of the dynamic lines explains the good fortune of the great man who is firm and correct. As regards speech-making, to be fond of argument or persuasion is the way to be reduced to extremity. Leg. The written Chinese character of oppression presents us with the picture of a tree within an enclosure. A plant, according to Williams, fading for want of room. A tree, according to Tai Tung, not allowed to spread its branches. The image conveys the idea of being straitened and distressed, and the hexagram indicates how skillful management may relieve it. The two central places in the figure are occupied by dynamic lines, but line 2 is confined between 1 and 3, which are magnetic, and line 5, the ruler, as well as 4, his minister, are covered by the magnetic 6th line. These conditions indicate the repression of good men by adversity. Konghasi editors imply that actions and not words are what are required in this case. Perilousness is the attribute of the lower trigram and cheerfulness that of the upper. The superior man, no matter how straitened, remains master of himself and pursues his principled intent. The idea of speech-making is found in the upper trigram, one of the attributes of which is the mouth, or speech, as well as pleased satisfaction. The pleading of the oppressed party still tries to make others pleased with him. Literally translated, the first sentence of the image reads, "A marsh with no water is oppression." Chu Hsi says, "The water descending and leaking away, the marsh above will become dry." Anthony, our belief in the ruling power as beneficial is shaken by doubt. This lack of steadfastness is a problem because it obstructs acceptance and its corrective power. We often receive this hexagram when we feel tired. The oppressiveness of doubt exhausts our inner resources. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. With enough will, success can be won. Actions speak louder than words, i.e., the answer lies beyond the realm of reason and logic. Intuition furthers. The superior man stakes everything he's got on his will to succeed. In oppression, we have the image of a dry lake bed. Anyone who has ever seen alkali flats in the desert can easily understand this metaphor for oppression. Almost nothing can live in such an environment. The following hexagram, the well, is an upside-down image of oppression, depicting the opposite case of an unending source of nourishment flowing from deep beneath the surface of the earth. A comparison of these two figures will reveal a great deal about the meaning of each. To be under oppression, then, is to be cut off from all sustenance. Although there is water down below, it is presently inaccessible, and there is no nourishing flow of inner forces to the surface. This is a common, inevitable, and potentially defeating experience for anyone doing serious inner work. A quote from Thomas Cleary in the Taoist I Ching. People who try to practice the Tao can all keep steadfast when they are in easy circumstances, but many of them waver in determination when they are in difficult or perilous situations. They may change their minds because of the pressure of making a living, or they may slack in determination due to illness. Their spirits may flag because of old age, or they may stop work because of obstruction by some obsession. All these are cases in which people do not exert the mind of Tao and are hindered by exhaustion, so they ultimately do not attain the Tao. Obviously, this is a dangerous situation, and we are told how to cope with it in the Confucian commentary, where it is observed that the lower trigram of peril goes on to the upper trigram of cheerfulness. These two trigrams are found in reversed sequence in hexagram number 60, restrictive regulations, where a cheerful attitude is described as absolutely essential for the furtherance of the work. I think a Taoist master calls it an inner smile. I think that's probably more common than just one person using it, but it makes me think of that. The observations made there also apply here, and we see the superior man thereby enabled to advance under conditions that would utterly defeat lesser individuals. This cheerfulness cannot be underestimated. When it comes naturally and isn't forced, it is a gift of grace. Suddenly, one is enabled to face the most incredible hardships with a light heart. It isn't that you no longer care. You still do the best you can to further the work, but you do it with bemused detachment. A quote from C. Ponce in Kabbalah. The one thing the Jewish mystics never lost sight of was the suffering experienced in the arena of the profane. They did not retreat from this suffering, but sought instead to find meaning in it by living it. This is the core of mysticism. The temple in which the sacred marriage takes place is the world. Lines 2 and 5 specifically mention sacrifice, an important concept in the I Ching. Sacrifice is mentioned in lines 17.6, 45.2, 46.2, 46.4, 47.2, 47.5, 63.5, and in the judgment of hexagram 20. Note that in each case, sincerity is specifically cited as essential to success. Sincere one is marked by genuineness, as a free of dissimulation, not hypocritical, real, true, honest. Very often the sincerity of our sacrifices involves following the dictates of the work, whether we fully understand them or not. Much that takes place in the work is incomprehensible to ego consciousness. For example, changes often occur within the psyche, which we only experience as strange dreams. Yet somehow, perhaps months later, we suddenly realize that we no longer act in a certain way or have lost interest in something that used to be of compelling importance. Our sacrifices are necessary for these changes to take place, even if they don't immediately make sense to us. A quote from the Bhagavad Gita: "With sacrifice shall you nourish the gods, and may the gods nourish you. Thus nourishing one another, you will obtain the highest good. The gods, nourished by sacrifice, will bestow on you the enjoyments you desire. He is verily a thief who enjoys the things that they give without offering to them anything in return." Each of Cleary's Taoist 1 and Buddhist 2 commentaries provides valuable insights into how much courage is required to follow the dictates of the work at its more advanced levels. Take comfort that others before you have persevered and survived. Developed people accomplish their will by living out their destiny. Next, we'll look at our supporting hexagram 45, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. James DeCorn calls it gathering together or contraction. Other titles might be massing, the symbol of gathering into one, assembling, congregation, gathering, unity, accord, making whole, focusing, marshaling one's forces, clustering, finished. Judgment. I just took a picture of the concrete and put it on my community page that says finish, but it's like FINSH. A kid wrote it. They're like running a race on the sidewalk or something. There's a start and finish written there. This is interesting. Leg. When forces are gathering, the king goes to his ancestral temple. For successful progress, maintain firm correctness and see the great man. A large sacrifice brings good fortune. Proceed toward your destination. Down the main gates. Doesn't say that. Wilhelm Sushbane's gathering together, success. The king approaches his temple. It furthers one to see the great man. This brings success. Perseverance furthers. To bring great offerings creates good fortune. It furthers one to undertake something. Blowfold, gathering together, success. The king approaches the temple. It is advisable to see a great man, which will ensure success. Persistence in a righteous course brings reward. Great sacrifices are offered, good fortune. These were religious sacrifices, but they may be taken to mean that the time has come for us to make important sacrifices of another sort. It is favorable to have in view a goal or destination. Ritsa/Karcher, clustering, growing. The king imagines possessing a temple. Harvesting, visualizing great people. Growing, harvesting trial. The veiling of the great. Sacrificial victims, significant. Harvesting, possessing directed going. What happened over there? Sacrificial victims, significant. That's what it makes me think of. Come quick. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of collecting and assembling. It emphasizes that bringing people and things together through a common feeling or goal is the adequate way to handle it. Do it. Woo. Congregation indicates that the king comes to his ancestral temple. It will be advantageous to see the great man. There will be pervasion, if persevering. It will be auspicious to use big sacrificial animals in the offerings. It will be good to have undertakings. The image, leg, a march above the earth, the image of contraction. The superior man, in accordance with this, assembles his weapons in readiness for unseen contingencies. I'll show them later, but got these spiritual weapons. Dojin, I think it's called, or Vajra. And then this one is a Tibetan Buddhist bead. But it's got these circles and lines. They said gold, but I think it's brass. On meteoric iron. The hole in it. This thing is incredible. This was the one that I made myself. A Vajra Thunderbolt out of brass fittings. I'm a plumber, but you know, that's an actual one. So that's pretty cool. Got spiritual weapons ready to go. Follow me. All right. The hell are we? Here we go. Moisture rises onto the earth, gathering. Thus do superior people prepare weapons to guard against the unexpected. When practitioners of the Tao get to where the 5 elements are assembled and have been returned to the source, when everything acquired is obedient to their will, if they do not know how to prevent danger and take perils into consideration, eventually what has been gathered will again disperse, and they will not be able to avoid the trouble of losing what has been gained. Weapons means the tools of wisdom, the work of silent operation of spiritual awareness. When the primordial has been congealed, it is not subject to injury by acquired conditioning, but it is still necessary to dissolve the influence of personal history before nature and life can be stabilized. If there is any remaining contamination, eventually conditioning will reassert itself and the primordial will again become fragmented. Therefore, the work of guarding is indispensable. I'm sure I'll probably try and bring it up in the end, but it makes me think of the idea of considering ourselves one with all that is, as opposed to a separate being, completely the separate self. Wu, the marsh is above the earth, this is congregation. Thus the Chunsi, or chief son or superior person, causes the nation to be armed in preparation for contingencies. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. Contraction shows massing for union through cheerfulness and obedience. The dynamic line is responded to in his ruling central place, hence the idea of union. With the utmost piety, the king presents his offerings to the spirits in his ancestral temple. Union with the great man is effected through correctness. The law of heaven demands a sacrifice. Contemplation of the way forces are gathered shows us the way of heaven, earth, and all of nature. Leg. Contraction means collecting together, or things so collected. The hexagram deals with the union between the ruler and his ministers, between high and low in the kingdom. This state is to be preserved through the influence of religion and the great man, who is a kind of philosopher king who meets the spirits of his ancestors in the temple. Whatever he does will succeed because he is correct and right, and his great sacrifices are in harmony with the times. The 2 trigrams represent docility and cheerfulness. The dynamic 5th line has his proper magnetic correlate in line 2, which gives the idea of union. Cheng Tzu says that the ordinances of heaven are simply the natural and practical outcome of heavenly principle. A marsh above the earth must be kept in by dikes, so the contraction must be preserved by precautionary measures, the chief of which is to be prepared to resist attack from without and to quell internal rebellion. Notes and paraphrases judgment. Forces are assembling for integration. Focus inward, sacrifice your autonomy, and allow the self to guide the work. The superior man pulls himself together to face the unknown and preserve the work. Forewarned is forearmed. Psychologically, contraction depicts a time when inner components of the psyche assemble for recombination into a new pattern. It is significant that this is the time when the king goes to his ancestral temple. That is, the governing intelligence turns toward the template or ideal image of the work as it exists in its consummate state. See commentary on hexagram number 59, expansion, for further discussion of the symbolism of the ancestral temple. If the gathering forces integrate in conformity with this archetype, the work is thereby advanced. A quote from Plotinus: "He, therefore, who perceives himself to associate with God will have himself the similitude of him. And if he passes from himself as an image to the archetype, he will then have the end of his progression." In addition to being a gestalt of future perfection, the temple is the home of the ancestors, a karmic repository of all that has gone into the work via the will and intent of former historical ego personalities. This archetype of the ancestors is described by the Lakota shaman Black Elk in his Great Vision. Note that the grandfathers and grandmothers are present when the people are walking in a sacred manner, i.e., conforming to the ideal archetypal pattern of the work. But I was not the last, for when I looked behind me, there were ghosts of people like a trailing fog as far as I could see, grandfathers of grandfathers and grandmothers of grandmothers without number, and over these a great voice, the voice that was the South, lived, and I could feel it silent. And as we went, the voice behind me said, "Behold a good nation walking in a sacred manner in a good land." The ancestral temple then symbolizes the work in progress as it exists outside of temporal awareness. At death, the karmic complexes of the psyche, released from their space-time ego body, assume new configurations in hyperspace in accordance with the accomplishments of the just completed lifetime. Ideally, the ancestors and their heirs, choices and their consequences within the ancestral temple undergo purification. This is what individuation, the work, is all about. A quote from Terence McKenna in The Archaic Revival. At the end of the dying process, consciousness divides into the consciousness of one's parents and one's children, and then it moves through these modalities and then divides again. It's moving forward into the future through the people who come after you, and backward into the past through your ancestors. In the multidimensional realms beyond our material world, time does not exist. In some way unimaginable to us, past, present, and future are consolidated into an eternal here and now. Thus, our choices in space-time can have consequences in hyperspace which are inconceivable to us in the current situation. So if the self, as manifested in the oracle, often seems to be tyrannically unreasonable, it is arguably because of the ego's dimensional myopia. A quote from W.B. Yeats in A Vision. "The spirit may know the most violent love and hatred possible, for it can see the remote consequences of the most trivial acts of the living, provided those consequences are part of its future life. In trying to prevent them, it may become one of those frustrators dreaded by certain spirit mediums. It cannot, however, without assistance, affect life in any way except to delay its own rebirth. With that assistance, it can so shape circumstances so to make possible the rebirth of a unique nature. Such conceptions of cause and effect seem irrational to ordinary awareness, yet quantum physicists hypothesize future events which affect the present as well as the past. The idea is not a new one." A quote from Hebrew Myths by Graves and Pataya. "Indeed, the hero of Hebrew myth is not only profoundly influenced by the deeds, words, and thoughts of his forebears, and aware of his own profound influence on the fate of his descendants, he is equally influenced by the behavior of his descendants and influences that of his ancestors. Thus King Jeroboam set up a golden calf in Dan, and this sinful act sapped the strength of Abraham when he pursued his enemies into the same district 1,000 years previously." Should the ego's choices and their consequences not conform to the self's intent, a rather cancerous growth is implied in which dynamic and magnetic forces are improperly consolidated. In I Ching terms, dynamic and magnetic are mismatched. Through this infidelity of correlates, the work is thus adulterated and falls short of the archetypal ideal. A quote from Jung in The Phenomenology of the Spirit in Fairy Tales. That the greatest effects come from the smallest causes has become patently clear, not only in physics, but in the field of psychological research as well. How often in the critical moments of life, everything hangs on what appears to be a mere nothing. Wow. Contraction is a compression inward toward a center. Psychologically, this can be regarded as an integration of complexes. Once the implosion completes itself, it is implied that the growth cycle reverses itself to expand away from the center. Hexagram number 59, expansion, in which the ancestral temple is also mentioned. The following hexagram pushing upward is the inverse of this one and depicts a similar upward expansion of energy. The archetypal themes displayed here are those of solve et coagula, implosion, explosion, contraction, expansion, black hole, white hole, day and night of Brahma, etc. Next, we will look at our changing line 2, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements, and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. So back to hexagram 47, James Acorn calls oppression. Changing line 2. Leg. The second line dynamic shows its subject straightened amidst his wine and viands. V-I-A-N-D-S. There come to him Anon, the red knee covers of the ruler. It will be well for him to maintain his sincerity as in sacrificing. Active operations on his part will lead to evil, but he will be free from blame. Wilhelm/Baines. One is oppressed while at meat and drink. The man with the scarlet knee bands is just coming. It furthers one to offer sacrifice. To set forth brings misfortune, no blame. This pictures a state of inner oppression. Externally, all is well. One has meat and drink. But one is exhausted by the commonplaces of life, and there seems to be no way of escape. Then help comes from a high place. Here, a disagreeable situation must be overcome by patience of spirit. Blowful. Difficulties arise through indulgence in food and drink. A vermilion sash wearer, man of very high rank, appears. It is advisable to utilize this opportunity to offer sacrifice. Advancing brings misfortune, though no error is involved. Wu, he is enslaved by wine and food. He just received a red vestment. It is good for making offerings. He will encounter ill fortune in having undertakings, but no error. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Although straightened, his position is central, and there will be ground for congratulation. Wilhelm/Baines. The middle brings blessing. Blowfold. The difficulties arising from our gluttony may nevertheless be productive of blessings. Ritzema/Karcher. Center possessing reward indeed. Clary 2. There is celebration within. Wu. The central position has things worthy of celebration. Leg. The three dynamic lines in the figure 2, 4, and 5 are all superior men, and their being straightened is not in themselves, but in their circumstances which prevent self-development. Hence line 2 is straightened while he fares sumptuously. His correlate in the 5th place, though not quite proper, is the ruler who comes to his help. The red knee covers distinguish the ruler from those of the nobles, which are scarlet. Let line 2 cultivate his sincerity and do the work of the hexagram as if he were sacrificing to spiritual beings, and then, if he keeps quiet, he will be well. Notes and paraphrases. Sue. The man is apparently well off, but is actually inwardly depressed. He is unable to solve the ordinary problems of life and develop his basic principles. He is rescued by the prince, who is looking for able helpers. However, he must first be patient until the unseen obstacles are overcome by prayers and sacrifices. Wing. An adversity facing you now comes about from boredom. Indulgences and pleasures may come too easily for you. Try giving yourself to a worthwhile cause. There is redemption in such altruistic actions. Editor. The core idea here is that a sacrifice of some kind is necessary to relieve your oppression. Sacrifice is a universal principle deeply rooted in the unconscious psyche. The general idea behind it is the offering of something valuable to obtain something more valuable, which may not be immediately obvious. It is an act of faith and acknowledgement of subservience to higher guidance. In terms of the work, this is the ego's sacrifice of its autonomy to the self. Here, the situation is the seeming contradiction of being oppressed while surrounded by plenty. So the sacrifice could involve not partaking of what is readily available. Compare with 45.2, which is created if this is the only changing line. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Alchemy of Healing. Sacrifice, making sacred, from the Latin sacrum facere, psychologically entails a surrender of ego libido to the service and intents of the transpersonal entelechy. Transformation rests on sacrifice, on making holy by giving up and rendering to the transpersonal sacred, to the transpersonal sacred powers what one has while remaining what one essentially is. I should probably read that again because I totally made that sound weird. Transformation rests on sacrifice, on making holy by giving up and rendering to the transpersonal sacred powers what one has while remaining what one essentially is. Gotcha. One submits to change, death and loss of some aspects of one's being, abilities or possessions, while refusing to curse God and die, like Job 2:9. In other words, refusing to let go of one's trust in life and one's central core of integrity and self, capital Self. James DeCorn breaks changing line 2 into 3 possible succinct definitions, A, B, and C. A, starving amid plenty, one has almost made a connection with the source of truth. Give up your illusions and wait. B, what you seek is all around you, and the connection is imminent. Have the will to sacrifice an option to relieve your oppression. C, you can afford to sacrifice something now in the faith that you'll get something better later on. Next, we will look at our secret hexagram, which is obtained by using the second, third, and fourth lines of our hexagram, our primary hexagram for the bottom trigram, and third, fourth, and fifth lines for the top trigram. So it's going to be solid, broken, solid, and then broken, solid, solid, which is going to be Li, fire and light beneath broken, solid, solid. What one was that again? Xun, wind, or wood. So it's going to be hexagram 37. Solid, broken, solid, solid. Yep. And the secret hexagram is the hidden influence behind the situation. We'll get the title again from the Taoist I Ching by I-ming. Hexagram 37. I-ming calls people in the home. Governing the inner, refining the self, mastering the mind, turning the attention inward. I just put up on my community page one of my old I Ching readings that had people in the home in it. We will look at our secret hexagram in Benabel Wen's I Ching The Oracle. Hexagram 37. Benabel Wen calls the family. Oracle. Do not resist dependence on others, but be so independent that others depend on you. When there is interdependence, then there will be great success. Nurture your familial bonds. First, loyalty to the clan. Leave no housekeeping unattended. With them, you are strengthened and supported. With you, they are anchored and united. Wind from within, fire emanates outward, synergy for movement forward. This is the clan, the family, interdependence. The sage's words hold enduring power. Prosperity pivots upon the woman. Traditionalists interpret Hexagram 37 as a particularly auspicious divinatory result for women. Thus, in readings for a man, the oracle counsels the man to follow the woman in the matter at hand. Her direction is auspicious and bodes well for your own endeavors. Confucianists interpret the hexagram as moral instruction on a woman's place and influence in the family. Women hold the clan together. There is an analogy and connection made between the role of women in the clan and words in society. Both are powerful, influential forces in the shaping of a civilization's humaneness. At the heart of Hexagram 37 is the political philosophy that the strength and power of a nation pivots upon the social and economic status of its society's women. Let's also look at it through Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future. 37. She calls people in the home. Key questions. Where are the boundaries of the home you inhabit? How are you building inner and outer relationships into a home? What kinds of growth does this environment support? Oracle, people in the home, a woman's constancy is fruitful. The old Chinese character for home shows a pig under a roof. A home is where people rear a pig together, sharing wealth, work, and value. People in the home cooperate in their shared space and invest in it together, as in a family, workplace, school of thought, or culture. And within the structure it provides, they can recognize and understand what is valuable. To create a successful home, you need to have the constancy of a woman. Steadily, over time, your work creates a space in which all can grow freely into their natural form and find their place and their connections with others. You allow space for new things to enter and grow, becoming part of the whole inner ecosystem. You keep the space for living in. Image. Wind comes forth originally from fire, people in the home. A noble one's words have substance, and her actions are consistent. A strong fire in the hearth will create its own drought. The light and warmth at the center of the home translating into far-reaching influence in the world. It represents a constant living awareness that pervades the structure and makes its presence felt in everything the noble one says and does. Also, the fire needs a free flow of air to burn cleanly and steadily. Real words and consistent actions keep it alight. Sequence. People in the home follows from Hexagram 36, brightness hidden. Injury on the outside naturally means turning back towards the home, and so people in the home follows. The home is a refuge. Inner light that had to be hidden away from the outside world is secure here and finds expression. When you are unappreciated or unseen, you turn back and connect with like-minded people. Pair. People in the home forms a pair with Hexagram 38, opposing. Opposing means outside. People in the home means inside. These two hexagrams describe a single landscape. Every inside must have its outside. Inside, you find your fellows, those who share your vision. Outside are the foreigners who see differently and do not belong in this home. Next, we will get a randomly card-drawn chapter from the Tao Te Ching while we sum up the reading. Our primary hexagram 47, Exhaustion, has calm water beneath dewy lake or marsh, and the lake water is slowly drained into a void. And so it dries up, essentially. And basically, in Lu Ming's Taoist I Ching, it talked about practicing the Tao, and that many can practice the Tao when everything is going well, but only few there are that practice it when things are adverse to them and things get difficult. Like almost like thinking about alchemy, since I-ming's Taoist teaching is, I would say, largely focused on that. It's almost like regardless of what's going in your life, you're continually alchemizing things internally, and you sort of keep a certain amount of pressure on that vessel, where you're gathering the medicines and stoking the fire, and there's a firing process and all of those things, and you want to keep a certain amount of heat, but you don't want to burn things. So let's briefly look at I-ming for that. I think I'm just going to kind of skim things in the commentary section. I think that's where it's most fruitful to look, if I recall. Exhaustion. What superior people see in this is that just as a lake without water is empty, when people lack purpose, their path is at an end. Therefore, they use life to the full to achieve their aim. There is a life that consists of a quantity of energy, and there is a life that consists of meaning of the Tao. The life that is a quantity of energy is created by the universe and is conditioned. The life of meaning of the Tao creates the universe and is primordial. The primordial life is fundamentally something celestial, associated with heaven. Because of mixture with acquired conditioning, it enters the realm of earth and changes into water. This is the one yang in the center of water. Once this celestial yang falls, the jewel of life is hidden, and the whole body is completely mundane. There is no exhaustion more exhausting than this. Using life to the full means to get to the end of conditioned life. Achieving one's aim means to achieve the primordial life. Establishing this aim to use life to the full, using life to the full to achieve this aim, while the amount of energy depends on something else, creating life depends on oneself. Using the temporal to restore the primordial, ending false life and establishing real life, producing being in the midst of nothingness, seeking life within death, getting through an exhausting impasse is like a lake without water, again being filled with water. If you were to turn this hexagram upside down, you would have hexagram 48, the well, which is the opposite situation. You have a means of accessing water, whereas here you're having all the water dry up. And it shows the image of a tree surrounded with its roots confined and its branches confined. I think of like a bonsai tree. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, is 45, gathering. And it's gathering a bunch of forces into one area. There's an idea of like solvet coagula in the alchemical work, where you have also the idea of pressing inward and then things exploding outward. So you're consolidating all these things into one small area. What superior people see in this is that when practitioners of the Tao get to where the 5 elements are assembled and have been returned to the source, when everything acquired is obedient to their will, if they do not know how to prevent danger and take perils into consideration, eventually what has been gathered will again disperse, and they will not be able to avoid the trouble of losing what has been gained. Therefore, superior people prepare weapons to guard against the unexpected. Weapons means the tools of wisdom, the work of silent operation of spiritual awareness. When the primordial has been congealed, it is not subject to injury by acquired conditioning, but it is still necessary to dissolve the influences of personal history before nature and life can be stabilized. If there's any remaining contamination, eventually conditioning will reassert itself and the primordial will again become fragmented. Therefore, this work of guarding is indispensable. If one can prepare the weapons of wisdom to avoid being caught unawares, one will always have autonomous presence of mind, and the jewel of life will not be damaged. After a long time, the 5 elements will merge and sublimate. Body and mind will both be refined, merging with the Tao in reality, becoming eternally incorruptible, So the process of preserving integration is important. And in the changing line, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. It says, hard up for wine and food, then comes the regal robe. It is beneficial to make ceremonial offerings. To go on an expedition brings misfortune, no blame. Explanation. With yang fallen in the midst of yin, this is when sustenance is insufficient, like being hard up for wine and food. Luckily, firmness here is balanced, forgetting oneself for the Tao. Though the body be exhausted, the mind is not exhausted. One day, bitterness will end and sweetness will arise. The great Tao completed, one then wears celestial clothing and eats celestial food. Cultivating celestial nobility, human nobility will follow. First there are hard times, then there is success. We can be sure of this principle. The image of success after hardship likens the benefit to making ceremonial offerings to reach heaven with sincerity, seeing the effect after a long time. If, when one is in hard times, one wants to get out of hardship right away, that will instead bring on misfortune, and one cannot blame anyone if one comes to an impasse and doesn't get through. This line refers to success after hardship, growth after exhaustion. Another commentary, Benabel Wenz, is really great on this one and has some nuance to it as well. So we'll read that for our changing line here. 47, changing line 2. Okay. Satiated by food and wine excess, a vermilion sash wearer arrives. A sacrificial offering brings good fortune. Advancing brings adversity. A state of inner strife and self-imposed oppression, satiating excessively through food and wine, or immediate gratification to numb the pain and dull the senses. You try to give the superficial impression that all is well with you, but there is oppression within. You have imprisoned a part of yourself inside of yourself. The vermilion sash wearer is a harbinger of change. You are tempted to make rash, hasty, dramatic changes to your life, changing just for the sake of changing. Doing so would be ill-advised. Thus, advancing brings adversity. Official seals worn by ministers were often hung from a vermilion sash. Thus, an alternate interpretation of the vermilion sash would be as government action, law and policy, systemic or institutional influences on the situation at hand. This can be a foreshadowing that some form of punishment is imminent. A sacrificial offering can mean self-reflection and deeper contemplation of the matter at hand before taking any action, or it can mean consulting your ancestors for counsel. Seems to highly emphasize a sacrifice being needed to the ancestors or the gods. I'm not sure which exactly, or if both. It also talks about I think it's our supporting hexagram, that the king entered the temple. Our secret hexagram is people in the home, and talks about an inner fire going on that comes out in everything that the sage says and does. And it presents an inner warmth and brings people together around the home, and it is highly highlights the role of women in society and in the home, that they bring, like that yin principle brings things together. With it being the new moon in Capricorn and the first new moon of the calendar year, I'm not sure if you saw, I can probably leave a link in the description box below, but I did polar bear baptism in the river here, in the Pilchuck River, which means red water. And I took these with me. I just got them, and I ordered them at different times, and they both arrived on the same day. and I performed that ritual with them. This I already stated when I showed it before, but is a Tibetan Buddhist bead or dojin or vajra or talisman made out of meteoric iron. And this is a vajra or dojin made out of bronze. But anyway, and also this guy I brought in with me that can use to make your own hexagrams and stuff with the moon and the sun. So basically, feeling kind of compelled to start everything new with a fresh start for myself. It was like I was standing there, and then the pressure of getting in the water, even though I'm sick, and I hesitated for quite some time, was mounting, and it felt as though in order to both kind of like create some sort of binding ritual with these new incredibly powerful spiritual tools, and also symbolizing the newness of the year, the new of the moon, and kind of a devotion, as well as a sacrifice of the old self. I was compelled to do that. Let me come back in just a second. Something. All of this. Drank entirely too much tea. If you must know. In our supporting hexagram, I believe it was, Annabelle Wen, I think, talked about sacrificing a large animal. It was said quite strangely. Something about bringing a lot of meat together or something like that. Or mini sacrifices. So the general vibe I feel from everything is this idea of being cut off. Oh yeah, also the Zhaoyu was talked about in this. Let's read this whole thing because this is pretty interesting. This is the supporting hexagram 45, assembly. A leader arises among them. You are destined to gather the people in congregation and unite them under your purpose. But take care that when you do, you are also prepared to handle the strife that is bound to arise when people congregate. This is your forewarning. Have a contingency plan in place. It's not about personal sacrifice. It's about aligning personal will with heaven's will. Choose progress. Start now. The lake collects water, which seeps into the earth and enriches it. A fish and a dragon gather in assembly. The sage is called to refine another, a warrior of great talent and ability. Stop not the Zhaoyu. The king enters the ancestral temple, favorable to go meet imminent one, the eminent one. An auspicious omen, an honorable leader or messiah arrives. The sage must sharpen the weapons. The weapons will be needed to battle dangers ahead. And that's when I talked about these. I like a spiritual weapon that I was using. Anyway, regarding the warrior, one of these ideograms could also be a reference to the Quanrong, an ethnic group that often invaded the Zhao. The Quanrong claimed ancestry from two sacred white dogs and venerated the white dog spirits as the emblem of their clan. Makes me think of the two dogs on the moon card in the tarot, or the dog and the wolf or something. The king entering the ancestral temple is a reminder to be humble and honor your roots. Great fortunes to come from proceeding. And then again, the Zhaoyu was a mythical creature of Chinese lore that symbolized benevolence, virtue, loyalty, and righteousness. Like the Quilin, the Zhaoyu appears as an omen of a coming great leader. The Zhaoyu appears to forecast the rise of a spiritual leader or a kind-hearted sovereign, one who is a paragon of goodness and who is religiously devout. The Zhaoyu was said to be a creature that resembles a white tiger with black spots. According to the Book of Mountain and Seas, a pre-Qin dynasty book, the Zhaoyu is a sacred animal resembling a white tiger with black markings. There are also 5 magical attendant grasshoppers or scorpions in service of the Zhaoyu. And then at the end of chapter 1, I'll show you a picture of the Zhaoyu. It's cold. Why'd I take my hat off? Apologies. This takes me a second here. Just a little bit. Haha. Zhaoyu. Okay, and then I said that we were gathering all kinds of meat. I'm guessing it's probably in Hexagram 47. And since I didn't read it in 45. Sign of the sacrifice. Losses sustained for a greater good of greater subsequent success. Hexagram 47 describes one with great ambitions, but with that comes great demands. Pursuit of big rewards come with big risks. At this particular point in time, challenges and barriers hold you back from movement forward. Hexagram 47 was traditionally used in baneful magic to blockade someone to prevent that person from achieving prosperity or advancement. So that's our primary hexagram is 47, with just being completely enclosed or walled in. The oracle, ambitions hit a wall, feeling exhausted and worn down. You are overwhelmed, unable to cope with your feelings of entanglement. Barriers of entry to the next level of advancement. Forces cause you to become isolated, closed off, and surrounded. Obstruction of passage and progress, a state of inner oppression. In the darkness, you do not yet see how the restraining bonds can be broken. First, do not let external forces restrain you. Restrain yourself. Control what you can control. Cultivate an inner strength that becomes an outer strength, and you can shatter the iron hand that is otherwise holding you back. Forecast of triumph over hardships, auspicious for the imminent one. Truth presents itself, but there is no truth. Trust presents itself, but there is no trust. There is a message, but it is not a message. Words spoken, but there is no meaning. So I suppose they didn't talk about that. A sacrificial offering in Changing Line 2 can mean self-reflection and deeper contemplation of the matter at hand before taking any action, or it can mean consulting your ancestors for counsel. So all in all, if we had to really, really sum up everything succinctly, let's also, before we get too crazy, I do want to look at James DeCorn's 3 possible succinct definitions for our Changing Line 2 of Hexagram 47. Once again, he also had something really great to say that he took straight from I-ming's Taoist I Ching in one of these. But first, let's just read the Changing Line stuff. He breaks Changing Line 2 into 3 succinct definitions, A, B, and C. A, starving amid plenty, one has almost made a connection with the source of truth. Give up your illusions and wait. B, what you seek is all around you, and the connection is imminent. Have the will to sacrifice an option to relieve your oppression. C, you can afford to sacrifice something now in the faith that you'll get something better later on. Yeah, we brought that up. In notes and paraphrases for Hexagram 47, the judgment says, with enough will, success can be won. Actions speak louder than words, i.e. the answer lies beyond the realm of reason and logic. Intuition furthers. The superior man stakes everything he's got on his will to succeed. In oppression, we have the image of a dry lake bed. Anyone who has ever seen alkali flats in the desert can easily understand this metaphor for oppression. Almost nothing can live in such an environment. The following hexagram, the well, is an upside-down image of oppression, depicting the opposite case of an unending source of nourishment, flowing from deep beneath the surface of the earth. To be under oppression, then, is to be cut off from all sustenance. Although there is water down below, it is presently inaccessible, and there is no nourishing flow of inner forces to the surface. This is a common, inevitable, and potentially defeating experience for anyone doing serious inner work. And then in the Taoist I Ching, it says, people who try to practice the Tao can all keep steadfast when they are in easy circumstances, but many of them waver in determination when they are in difficult or perilous situations. They may change their minds because of the pressure of making a living, or they may slack in determination due to illness. Their spirits may flag because of old age, or they may stop work because of obstruction by some obsession. All these are cases in which people do not exert the mind of Tao and are hindered by exhaustion, so they ultimately do not attain the Tao. That brings to mind the idea that in I-ming's Taoist I Ching, that the focus was in almost like erasing your humanity, that in order to bring about the Tao and the fullness of it and your absorption into it as though you were ever a part of it. You know, it's like the realization of you being a part of all that is, but the parts, the lines between the parts being blurred. And that's interesting too, because if the primary hexagram is 47, where you're cut off, exhaustion, or being walled in, I think Hilary Barrett called it confined. And this is the picture of the bird in the circle. That's like the idea of us being separate from others. And So with that being the case, and the supporting hexagram talking about gathering, you're like bringing everything together, and then with the changing line, you have a sacrifice, and you're approached by somebody with authority, but the idea is if you advance, there will be adversity. So it's good to not make any immediate kind of rash decisions about anything. Even if you're given some sort of opportunity, it's good to weigh things out. And also, if you're hoping to have success, the idea would be to sacrifice something of value for something greater, knowing, and it says this, knowing that something greater will come. So it's also important that it talks about the sage or the great person bringing people's attention to the ancestors, and that when we get out of touch with nature and with the ancestors, then all manner of things go awry. But when we bring our attention back to our place in things and the ancestors and where we fit in all of this, then right decisions can be made. And I would almost talk about that gathering being like gathering all the medicines into one place. And if you're confined, that confinement won't last forever, it talks about. But being confined when you have all the medicines together is the perfect situation if you apply heat for that alchemical process to start taking place. And for that solva et coagula, where everything's imploded into the center and then explodes outwards from there. And so it's like a time of not much happening, maybe from an outside perspective, or the idea of maybe it feeling like an inauspicious time. But really great work is being done when the king is entering the temple, for instance. And even with the hexagram, 37 people in the home being the secret hexagram, that yin principle, drawing everything in and having like the hearth burning in the center of the home. You've got the heat right there. So you've got all the components necessary for that alchemical work. And what's necessary at its highest is sacrifice. And it talked about like a great bull or a large animal being sacrificed for this. So at the time we are in history now, it feels very appropriate that we come to this moment, especially with the new moon and all of that considered, with sort of like, what can we sacrifice that will, like a hot air balloon, allow us to rise? There's sacks of sand tied to these hot air balloons or whatever that is, and they're meant to be able to be released at certain points. So if you feel as though you are carrying too much weight, you might consider where you're intending on heading and what you may be able to sacrifice in order to have something greater come about. And what I would suggest is that the greatest goal we could attain is that of absorption into the Tao, if you could call it that. It's not like we're separate from it anyway, but that idea that the sage points people's attention towards the dissolving of their humanity and the subsuming into the Tao itself. And that if you're not keeping a certain amount of attention towards that, even in times of struggle and trials, you might slip back into over-identification with your history and with everything. There's nothing wrong with having your toe dipped into all of the things that make you an individual. But the more important factor of your existence is how you fit into everything. And that is something that is seen from a higher vantage point than the idea that we're really, really, really contained within our history, like we're walled in by our own life story, our traumas, the things that have happened to us, our country, nationality, our gender, illnesses, all kinds of things can feel like a wall. But with the right ingredients, those medicines contained within that wall, it can create that alchemical process where the fire that we have in Hexagram 37 can be added to this situation. And you have people in the home where they're gathering. It can be even kind of like a semi-enjoyable time where you're bringing people of like mind into one area. And that work, when you create that sacrifice and be patient with your decision making and not necessarily just jump on the first opportunity that presents itself out of almost a desperation to just get out of the situation at hand. But the sense that you're going to make a sacrifice and maybe wait, when you've slept on it, for instance, or wait for things to become more clear, would be wise. It talked about advance brings adversity. At least immediate advance does. So it would be wise to consider what kind of opportunities are before you right now and whether or not it's best to kind of reevaluate things and perform some sort of ritualistic sacrifice, like jumping into the river, for instance, in winter. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that for everyone. For me, coming out of Christianity, the baptism idea of starting anew is definitely ingrained in me. So when I do that, it feels like it locks into my subconscious. It connects my body and everything to do something that is uncomfortable for me to do. It reminds me of Everything, Everywhere, All at Once in that movie where they did some random strange thing. And because they did it, it links them to this other reality in a mirror universe where they are different and maybe are more skilled in kung fu or something like that. But I think of it too, when you talk about the different bodies, it's like breaking through and entering one of your higher bodies, like the rainbow body being one, or the clear body. There's like all kinds of names for them in all different traditions. But you don't just hit up against a ceiling and stay there. Through that alchemical work, you process your way through to the next, which in the end becomes everybody and everything, everywhere, all at once. Just want to end it there, and I don't have a card yet. Let's get one. Wanted to be super profound and by quoting a movie. There we go. 77. I'm going to read from 3 different Tao Te Ching translations. One from Benjamin Hoff, The Eternal Tao Te Ching. Heaven's Way, the Wise, 2. Heaven's way is like the act of drawing a bow, in which the top end is lowered and the bottom end is raised. The height is decreased and the shallow space between the string and the bow is made full. Heaven's way is to take away from the excessive and add on to the insufficient. Man's way, as a rule, however, is not like that. He takes from those who do not have enough in order to give to those who have an excess. Who is able to have an abundance to offer to the world? One who only has the way. The wise act, but do not rely on action. They achieve merit, but do not reside in it. They have no desire to appear worthy of acclaim. Next, we will look at Jia Fu Feng and Jane English's translation of the Tao Te Ching. The Tao of heaven is like the bending of a bow. The high is lowered and the low is raised. If the string is too long, it is shortened. If there is not enough, it is made longer. The Tao of heaven is to take from those who have too much and give to those who do not have enough. Man's way is different. He takes from those who do not have enough to give to those who already have too much. What man has more than enough and gives it to the world? Only the man of Tao. Therefore the sage works without recognition. He achieves what has to be done without dwelling on it. He does not try to show his knowledge. And Nothingness and Zero, a postmodern approach to Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. Shout out to Core of Black Raven Metaphysics, who I learned that this book existed through. 77, Pretenses. Charity, you say? I say greed. Gifts, you say? I say destruction. Heaven and the sage live these truths. This is ginkgo biloba. It balances yin and yang. This is elder. I just had an elderberry juniper kombucha earlier. Apparently badgers and rabbits run around underneath them often, and there's a bunny like naturally in this thing. Looks like a rabbit face. There's a hole. Elders often are hollow. Stop screwing around. Chuang Tzu was very playful, apparently. So maybe I relate a little bit more to him than Lao Tzu. Leaning heavy on that divine, what do they call it? The divine child or something? Sacred child. Archetype.